Hello there. Welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures, and welcome to what is another compilation video. You know, YouTube likes consistency, and sometimes, especially in the life of somebody that's got a day job, you're not able to get content filmed and out every week. So decided to go ahead and make these compilation videos. The last one was on the old Chicken Hawk Hawkeye. This time, we're going to be looking at Ruby Sue. That's our 2002 Polaris Sportsman 400. And this will just be the series of all the videos that we've made regarding that particular quad, ATV, four-wheeler. Anyway, I appreciate you clicking. Just, put it in the shop in the background while you're out there working, have it playing. Just, I really appreciate it. But anyway, here comes Ruby. Hey folks, I figured it's about time I finally introduced y'all to Ruby Sue. Welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures, and welcome back to the shop. So like I said in the intro, I just figured it's about time y'all met Ruby Sue. She's been a part of the family for a while now and hasn't really been featured on any videos. I know we started out with the review of the old 500 mainly because we needed to sell it. So I wanted to get that review done before we sold it. And then I went right into the new stuff, Dusty and the as yet to be named black Polaris Sportsman. But I figure it's about time we get y'all up to speed with some of the older rigs we have hanging around the shop. So when I picked this rig up, I was really in the market for one of these models, the 2002, 3, 4, the Gen 4 models like this. My wife didn't really care for the bigger, wider seat that was on the newer units, like the 2005 through, 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there. Like the 500 you may have seen earlier. She's not tall, so having the really wide seat, would have been difficult for her. So she wanted something with a narrower seat. This model fit the bill perfectly. And much like the newer Polaris Sportsmans, you have all the same features. Your four-wheel drive, you do have a low range, you do have independent rear suspension, which is very nice when you're out on the trail, going over rocks, bumps, logs, anything else. It makes the ride much nicer, and it actually makes it a lot more stable over those conditions. But here's the question. Would one of these rigs, be right for y'all? I don't know. We're going to walk around this unit, and we're going to find all the good things and the bad things, and what makes them a good value, and where they could have made them better. But look, at the time they made these, I don't think there was anything that could compete with them. We're going to go through this rig. We're going to see everything we like about her, everything we don't like, which I'll be honest, isn't really much. We're going to see all the things we've done as far as upgrades, repairs we've made, maintenance, things like that. But anyway, let's just get into it. Let's start checking this rig over. So let's start off with looking under the seat. We've got a little bit of storage, and in these models, you don't get a lot of storage. There's no front rack storage. There's just a little bit of a box under the seat, but let's check that out. So we've just got a quick little latch behind the no passenger sign back here. Lift it up and pull it off. That's pretty easy. Under here, of course, you've got your air filter, and we do run a uni filter in this. I'm a big fan of the uni two-stage filters. But here's your storage compartment. Before we put the seat back on, I'm going to show you something on this machine that broke on our newer, the Gen 5, the 500. And I know I've explained it a couple times when we did a walk around on it and actually replaced the entire rear fender because of this one single issue. But on this older rig, she's a lot more sturdy. So, of course, what I'm referring to is the seat latch. Now, just like in the newer model, it's still attached to the plastic. It's latched. So let's take it off and see what happened. Polaris decided to take this seat latch mount, set it nicely and gently on the frame here. Just set it there, nice, gentle, but mount it to the plastic. But I don't know what it is. This feels a lot stronger. And this rig, she's quite a bit older. And, well, as you can see, she's also not broken. So, however this design is different, it seems to be better. So putting the seat back on these rigs is simple. You just kind of make sure it hooks up under the front and drop the back down, make sure it latches. Grab the front, make sure it's hooked, and good to go. While we're on the topic of storage, it's always nice to have some place to put your keys, or maybe your wallet, your chapstick, maybe your lipstick. I don't know. Maybe registration papers, things like that. It's always nice to have somewhere to put that. And when you don't have any other storage that's easy to access, these fender bags, they work nice. Now, I've put these on all of our older machines. We had it on the 500. We've got it on Ruby Sue. And we even have one on the old Chicken Hawk. Out of all the brands that are out there, I like this one the best. This is the Moose Utility Division Moose Racing bag from the Moose thing. Look, they just work really well. I like them. The wife likes them. Of course, now we don't use them, but the people that ride these machines, now they like them. So when I brought this old girl home, kind of the first thing we did is get the winch off, get the snowplow off, and get the tires changed off. It still had the original tires that came from Polaris on it. And while they're fine for the kind of riding and terrain we tend to go through, they just really weren't going to cut it. So you can see from the pictures here, what she looked like the day I brought her home, right there strapped to the trailer at the little dealer I picked her up from. You can see the snowplow, the winch, the tires. So we just got into it straight away. For tires, we went to the Rocky Mountain ATV MC Squared website and got these Counttrax, R-Trax things. The wheels, those are ITPs, just their cheap steel wheels. At the time, they were like $25 a wheel, but I think now they're up on about $50 a wheel. This rig also already had the big rack extender on it when we bought it. I'm guessing when it was purchased new by somebody, that was either on it or they ordered it and had it added on. Well, let's get into some of the, the nitty gritties, the details of the machine. So up front, you have the traditional Polaris, strut style suspension, which they're still using today. You may have seen on our 570s, Dusty over there, she has the same design suspension. However, it's been refined and is much better. But look, these are pretty good. Something you also notice down here are these massive A-arm guards. I like these. So I have no idea why Polaris has decided that they no longer should provide these on their ATVs or quads or four-wheelers. I have no idea why they stopped putting these on, but you can see they protect the A-arm a little bit, but most importantly, they're protecting the CV boots from damage. And, Polaris is still working on coming out with CV boot guards, for their Sportsman models. And I've not been able to buy them yet. I think they're still unavailable on their website. But the thing is it only protects the outer CV boot. And, I can reference you back to having to replace the CV boot on my 570. It was the inner CV boot that tore. So no protection in the modern Sportsmans, which is a little frustrating. But these older units, man, look at that. And I haven't figured out a way to bolt the old ones onto the new models yet. You know, it says liquid cooled. She is. She's cooled by the liquid. And then on this side, you know, you have the exact same thing. That was probably a stupid thing to say out loud. Okay, moving on. You've got your fuel valve here. Don't find these on any of the newer models, but you know, this is one of the older models, so there it is. Coming around the back. You know, if you've watched the review of the 500 and even the review of the 570s, you'll recognize some of this. Now, these, of course, these A-arms aren't nearly as beefy or as long because they're a bit on the older side, but it's still the same design. You've got your independent rear suspension, your CV, you know, axles with the CV joints and boots. And I have replaced these a couple of times. Long story. Well, sure. We'll tell the story now. So when I purchased this rig, you know, I purchased it from like a little wholesale dealer, and they got it from somebody up in the mountains that used it for, you know, plowing snow, which is why it had a snowplow on it. But it appeared to me that they stored it outside. So after owning this thing just a couple of years, went to go ride it and looked at it, and both axles on the back had split CV boots. So I thought it was a great idea to try to replace those myself, and I'd never done it before, so it didn't go well. Long story short, I ended up replacing the axles. Anyway, store them inside. Keep from drying out. That's going to come up later, I promise. So getting back into the rear suspension, we've got the same sway bar design that we saw in the 500, and our new 570s have this as well. For a while, Polaris had their XP chassis in these units, and it had a different sway bar design, and look, they were stiff. They weren't quite as plush. The rear shocks on these, they are adjustable for preload. It's just the spring, and it's got the, you know, you turn it, and it's got like 5 settings. You've got your transmission in here. These older units, got a dead battery? No problem. Give it a pull. Don't know if you ever tried to pull start something with a board this size. It's not fun, but it is doable. And, you know, foot brake, reminder, that's the rear brake only. And your transmission gear selector. These older units were a little different. I'm not sure if this is going to come out on the camera. The shift pattern on this, you know, the newer ones go all the way back, and you've got park, then reverse, then neutral, then low, and then high. This older unit has no park, and it's got a little bit of a gate to it. So on the left forward, you've got high, and then neutral, and like a reverse there. Neutral like a car, you know, if you have ever driven a stick shift, probably nobody. Anyway, but if you've driven a stick shift, you know, neutral, and then low is to the right and forward, and I just bumped the camera. Anyway, you do have to lube the box down there, but it's fine. You know, and then up top, you've got, you know, the normal things, your key switch and your choke over here, and you've got, you know, your speedometer, and this light switch is for the LED lights that we added. That little screen that tells us hours and things is really hard to read, so I'm going to do my best to try to read that and give you a what for on, you know, how much we've used this machine. So I know this isn't coming through on the camera here, but this is the little button that switches us around. We have 228.3 hours, 2,081.9 miles on this rig. So when we picked her up, she only had like 250 miles, something like that, but like 110 hours. So you can tell she was just used for plowing, and that was it. Still low hours for the year model. I mean, 2002, I think we picked her up in about 2015. So in that amount of time, only having 110 hours, pretty low hours. And, you know, of course, on the left hand, you've got your headlight switch, the low, the high, the low, the off. And, you know, it's the older machine. So low is the 2 headlights in the that are in the bumper, and then high is just the one in the headlight, which is pretty useless. And quite honestly, these old headlights, they're like glowworms. They don't really work well, which is why we added the LEDs up front. Engine stop switch and your reverse override, just like the newer models. Basically, if you're in reverse, you push that, takes off the rev limiter. If you're in four-wheel drive and you go in reverse, you only get rear wheels, even though you're in four-wheel drive. But if you push this while you're in four-wheel drive, it then engages the front wheels as well, so you can get four-wheel drive backing up. And then, of course, like Polaris started, I think they were the first brand to do this back in the 80s. You have one brake lever that does all four wheels. On the right-hand side, of course, typical thumb throttle. And this on-off, which doesn't tell you what it's the on-off for, but this is for the four-wheel drive. Oh, when you turn it on, it actually says it. It says all-wheel drive. Okay. And just like every other Polaris, they started doing this again in the 80s. They call it their true on-demand 4x4 or all-wheel drive system, which, it senses rear wheels slipping. And if it senses that, then it engages the front wheels. In the earlier models in the 80s, it was really bad because you couldn't turn it off. That was just always like that. And so you were, constantly fighting that front end. But in the newer models, they did they put a switch so you can turn it off. So if you don't want four-wheel drive, you don't have to have four-wheel drive. And they also made I don't know how it senses it, witchcraft, I assume. But it's a lot smoother engaging, and they just, over the years, get better and better and better at that. We've taken off the wheels on the right side of the unit so we can look at a few things and talk about a few things here. So at the back, we have your typical Polaris hub carrier hub thing. We talked about these, on the 500. This bolt right here, they like to shear off, and they like to do it back here. So having the experience we had with the 500 and that, happening to us, we went ahead and as soon as we picked this unit up, we just put new bolts in it to make sure we don't have a problem, and we're going to probably do that again soon as well. Well, as you can see on this one, the brake is way up here on the transmission for the rear brake, instead of out here at the hub, which is what you're probably used to seeing on a Polaris. But some of these Gen 4 models had it just sitting way up here, and it does work. It works just fine. I'm not sure what possessed Polaris to put it here, or what made them change it, but I'm glad that they did move it back here. Just seems like a strange design. Even though it does work, it just seems really strange to me. And now with the wheel off, you can actually see the adjustment that you can do on the shock here. Then now up to the front, you can see, you do have one of these at each front wheel. Notice your hub is much beefier on these older units, and that's because the four-wheel drive system, instead of being managed at the differential, is actually managed independently at each hub. It has no problems engaging. However, disengaging, occasionally you could get where one wheel disengages and the other doesn't. Even in the owner's manual for this, they actually mention this to how to address it is put it in reverse, back up, and then going forward, and it should let go. Have not had that problem with this, but you do have to maintain the hubs here. You do have to drain them and refill them with the fluid. They don't take much, and it's a bit messy job, but as long as you maintain these hubs, you should never have a problem. But again, strut suspension, Polaris has been doing this for many, many years. They're probably the only manufacturer that does it, and still does it even to this day. So I mentioned I believe that whoever owned this before stored it outside, and I'm going to kind of explain that a little bit more right now. So I noticed that not long after we got it, it started leaking just sitting in the garage. Not so much when you were using it. You can't tell if it's leaking when you're using it, when you're out riding. But, when she was sitting in the garage, there would be a puddle on the floor. And that puddle would be a mixture of oil and, coolant, which is usually alarming. That means that they're mixing somewhere. But in this case, they're not. But I found several leaks. And again, this all goes back to letting these things sit outside instead of being stored inside. First thing I noticed was that the valve cover was leaking. So got a new valve cover gasket, replaced that. And when I went to go replace it, oddly, all of the bolts that hold the valve cover were barely even finger tight. I don't know how that happens. Best guess is, gremlins wandering around inside there, just loosened them all up a little bit. Probably would have been okay just tightening it back down, but I didn't want to have any issues. Just replace the gasket. It was not expensive, less than $10 for the factory Polaris gasket, and then you know, put it back down. So that was that leak. But I was still having, from the bottom of the engine, oil and coolant leaking, which at first I thought it was just coolant, and I thought it was just the gasket for the water pump housing. Replaced that gasket, leak didn't go away. Discovered that there's a seal inside that housing, and it is a mechanical seal. And there's actually two seals. There's on the outside, there is a mechanical seal that seals the coolant, and then on the inside of that is another oil seal that seals the oil. And there's a weep hole at the bottom of the housing. Well, Polaris, I don't really know why, but Polaris has decided that it was, or at least they decided in the past, their newer engines, I don't know if this is a problem, but in these older engines, they thought it was a good idea to make it so these plugs could only be serviced from inside the crankcase. So the shop manual that I have actually says, take the engine apart, split the crankcase, and push the seals out from the inside. Listen, I'm not going to do that. So the seals are not expensive. The mechanical seal's like $50. The oil seal, I don't know, it's less than that. It's pretty cheap. It's a rubber seal. You get the cover off, get the impeller off, and then you have to just fight like hell to get that mechanical seal out from the inside. And it has some sealant built onto it. Ended up drilling some holes into the metal seal and using a slide hammer. Eventually got that thing out. There's several other videos on YouTube of people doing it, and pretty much everybody can tell you it is a pain. And it's not just this engine. The 800s that they had in the the racers, the older 800, they had the same kind of seal design. Anyway, got that out. And then for the oil seal that's behind that, all I did was take a couple of wood screws, put them in there, and then I was able to pull the oil seal out. Replaced both seals. My leaks went away. However, when you replace the water pump impeller, there's a nut that holds it on. And that nut is a one-time use nut. It's a self-locking acorn lock nut, and it has a very specific torque setting. Now, when you go to put that nut on, when you go to torque it to that setting, it feels like it's too tight. If you have to do this and replace that impeller or take it off for any reason, pay attention to the torque setting. I'll put it on the screen here in case anybody's got to get into that. Hopefully I never have to do it again. But if you don't, you're guaranteed to have an overheating issue, as you see here. We were out riding, and it was June last year, and all of a sudden the wife pulled up and there was just clouds of steam. And all it really was not getting that stupid nut torqued down properly. So, of course, I went ahead and bought a new impeller because I was afraid the shaft was just spinning on the impeller and that was ruining the impeller. So I bought a new impeller, another new lock nut, put it on, torqued it to the right torque setting, and put it all back together. She's been fine ever since. Something to note, this is not too common of a failure to have this oil leak. I am a firm believer that this happened because of being stored outside previously. Our 500 never had this issue, never had these leaks, and it's always been stored inside. It had more hours, more miles on it, and a lot harder miles. But anyway, follow the torque specification on that nut, and you should be okay. So Ruby Sue here, she's been sitting, just hanging out in the shop here for about 4 or 5 months. Hasn't been ridden in a minute, but we're going to go ahead and see how she wants to start up. Now, I know she's a little cold-blooded, and we're going to turn the fuel on, give us a little choke, and we'll see how she does. She tried to. Oh, there she is. She's alive. And like I mentioned, she is a little cold-blooded, so until she warms up, she idles kind of slow. But there we go. This old girl, she just doesn't miss a beat. Yeah, man. Good old girl. So here's the question. If you come across a deal on one of these rigs like old Ruby Sue here, should you pick one up? Well, it's entirely up to you. You know, they're very capable machines. They're very nice to ride. They are comfortable. You know, you've seen some clips of this thing going over some rocks and doing some things. They're nice, and you can get a good deal on these. They were definitely worth picking up. Just as with any used machine, you know, you're going to want to check them over thoroughly, especially when they're getting on about 20 years old, like this old girl. You know, you're going to want to check the bolts, make sure they're all there around the suspension. If they're not, it's not a big deal. You can replace them, but you know, if they're missing, then you might have something that got bent. Check for leaks under the engine, the bottom of the engine. Check for leaks, and if it looks like they've, you know, cleaned it up real good, you know, run it for a bit, let it sit, and then look at it again. Make sure she's not leaking. Make sure that when you go to purchase it, that it's cold. You know, feel the engine. Make sure it's cold before they start it. You want to make sure the thing's going to run. Make sure it runs at idle without the choke once it's warmed up. Give a sniff at the exhaust once it warms up. Make sure it's not burning oil. You know, this one doesn't burn a drop of oil, and now, thanks to all of our work, doesn't leak any oil either. And if you do find one that you like and you're lucky enough all those things check out, these are my recommendations. Replace the bolts on the rear hub carriers. Check all of the suspension bolts all the way around. Those are prone to come loose. Change the oil. Make sure that you've got fresh oil and a fresh filter, unless they have recently changed the oil and they have, you know, some proof of it. If it has a paper air filter in it, spend the, I don't know, 16, 20 bucks. Get a uni foam filter. They filter better, they flow better, and they'll last, you know, forever. But that's about it. You know, we love having Ruby Sue. Oh, look, somebody's honking at me. I'll be right back. Okay. Well, dealt with the honking horn situation out there. Um, what was I saying? Oh, Ruby. You know, we have loved having Ruby as part of the family. She's been great. Easy to ride, does everything we want her to do. I know she's no longer one of our primary units, but, you know, friends, family, anybody that goes out with us riding and camping, it's perfect for everybody, easy to learn, and just she gets it done. You know, I know there's always one person at least that's going to ask, well, how fast does she go? Well, you got to keep in mind she's just a 400. You know, it's not a big engine, it's just a 400, and she's roughly 650 pounds, you know, without the rider, gas, and all those things. So pretty heavy little machine here. And you know, the drivetrain that you see here robs a bit of power, but I have seen this little girl get up to about 50, I think maybe 55 miles an hour. That's about all you're going to get out of her. But again, she's not a sport quad. She's not a race quad. She is a utility quad meant for doing utility quad things. Hello and welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures and to today's project, Ruby Sue. Today we're going to be getting into some maintenance items on the old girl here. We're going to change the oil and oil filter. Going to adjust the valves. As I mentioned back in Christmas time, it's going to be a hoot, and we're going to do it. Ruby Sue, she's going to need a valve adjustment. That'll be a hoot, and we're going to do it. And thirdly, there's some heat shielding under this rear fender that's directly behind me right there that is coming off, and we're going to see if we can address that. So I'm hoping that we don't have to take the front fender and rack and all of that off to get to the top of the engine. It's right back there. We probably will be able to just get the side panels off and get to the top of the engine to pull the valve cover to adjust the valves. Changing the oil on these rigs that have an external oil tank, which you can see right there, you have to drain the oil in two places. First, you can see the drain plug right there at the bottom. So we're going to get it up in the air, take this front wheel off just to make that easy to get to. The second place is down here on this side, and you can find the drain plug by looking through this hole where the brake lever for the rear brake comes through. And, or can I do it? I don't know if I can get it in the camera. The drain plug, there it is. You can kind of see it. My finger's pointing to it behind the brake lever right there. So that's a booger to get to, but that's okay. And then of course we have the oil filter, and you can see the last time I've changed it because I wrote it on the filter, February 25th of 2022. It's February of whatever today is. It's February 17th of 2024. I know that's 2 years, but I also wrote the hours, 216 hours. And I don't know if this is gonna come in or not. You can see it. 234 hours is what we currently have on the clock. So I know that's not a ton of hours. What is that? If you do the math and carry the 2, that's about 18 hours since the last oil change 2 years ago. Oil does last a really long time when you don't use it. And this old quad, now that we have the new 570 Sportsmans, doesn't get ridden much. It gets ridden mainly by the kids, and if I'm putting around, maybe dragging the yard or whatever. Slow down, buddy. Anyway, not a lot of hours. I think recommended oil change is much longer than that. But it's been 2 years, so we're just going to go ahead and change the oil because, you know, just because it's not a lot of hours doesn't mean I don't want to change it. And we figured just might as well go ahead and change it. It's not too expensive to do and give you peace of mind. Okay, and then finally, up under the fender, you can see this heat shield sticky tape that Polaris puts on. You know, you've got a heat shield on the exhaust pipe up there, but that's coming down, and once it starts coming off, you can't really put it back. So we're gonna replace that with something, which means that all this rear plastic has to come off, and means that we've got to unattach it from that footwell. And since we're going to need to have better access to that drain plug, we might as well take this floorboard footwell out too. It just helps with the access. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing up in the air and start taking bits off of it. I think I will start with the valve adjustment and then move to the oil change and then do the rear fender thing. That sounds like a plan. Sure. All right, so we've got, you know, the quad or ATV or four-wheeler. We've got it up in the air on the lift back here. Look, I don't know where you're from. I know I keep asking you, and some of you out there keep telling me, which is awesome, but where are you from? Tell me where you're from and what you call it. Are you from the South and you call it a four-wheeler? Are you from some other places like California, Arizona, Nevada? Maybe you call it a quad, or maybe you call it an ATV. I'm curious. Let me know in the comments, and I'll read those comments, and I'll reply to those comments and say thank you, and I'll put it on my list. Okay. Anyway, with this particular quad, with the OEM stock lug nuts, it takes a 9/16, because, you know, this is a 2002, so some of the fasteners on this unit, some are American sized, some are metric. You'll see what I mean later. Okay. Now these wheels, I don't know if I covered this when we did the review on the old girl, but these wheels, these are not the Polaris factory wheels. These are ITP standard steel wheels, and they're black, which is why I bought them. Now you can probably see it all the way from up there. You have access to the oil tank and the oil tank drain plug right there. Now we're going to go take some more bits off. Let's take the seat. Hello there. Okay. These side panels on these older units, they're scary to take off. They're not like the newer ones where they just have it, you just pop them on, or even the newer ones like the 570s. Those are actually a bit of a nightmare to put back on. These, when you take these off, they make you think you're going to break them. Let me show you. So you kind of give it a pull to dislodge it from back here, and you give it a pull. You give it a come on, baby, come on, come on. So like I said, you just give it a pull, and then it just kind of wiggles out. Give it to me. There we go. And I know I was a bit rough with it. You do want to be a bit careful because you can't buy these anymore unless you go on the eBay website and find some used ones. So fortunately, I've been able to work on this many times and still not break this. But now you can see we have good access to the engine right there, which we will need. But we got to take the other side off so we can get the fender off. Footwell's got to come, get all the things. So to get the footwell floorboard out, we need to disconnect it from this little mud flap flare here, and then also the same on the rear. And we only need to disconnect it up to here because the rest of this will come off with the rear fender, and when we take this piece out, it will leave this here and it won't be in the way. It'll be just fine right there. There's just a series of screws on the back side. It's kind of hard to, well, let's just get you in here. You can see we've got a series of screws in here. These are 3/8 head, and then down here you have a 3/8 with a 7/16 on the back side. We'll go ahead and take these 1, 2, 3 out, and then you can see back here, I don't know if you can see that right there, there's another 3/8 nut which goes to this little screw here. That's an easy one to forget because you don't necessarily see it. It blends in, and we also have the exact same thing here on the back, right there. That bottom one's a little trickier to get to. We're going to use just a couple of wrenches on this. We're going to put a 3/8 wrench on the back side because that's how big the bolt head is. And then I'm going to use this here ratcheting wrench. Just a friendly reminder, these ratcheting wrenches are available at any store that sells them. All right, so anyway, I'm going to use this ratcheting wrench and put it in a lefty-loosey kind of direction, and we'll just take it off. Okay, got that where we should be able to do it with our fingers is. And there's going to be a big fender type washer on here. Don't lose it. You're going to need that later. There we go. There we go. Put that in your parts tray. Okay, so on the back fender, you don't have that combination of 3/8 and 7/16. It's just 3/8 screws. And there are some. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these screws here, they do have a little washer on the back side. Don't lose that either. You'll need that. Otherwise the nut will pull through the fender and break it, and you'll be sad. I like to just, anytime there's a nut and washer, I like to just put it back together. And I forgot to get this one. Told you, they're easy to forget now. Forgot to get this one, so I'm going to snatch it out real quick. Now for the footwell, you have 4 screws. Well, let's get you back in here a little closer. For the footwell, you have 4 screws. The top side is just your favorite number 2 screwdriver. Make sure it's one that's going to fit nicely in there and not have really any play. And then on the bottom side, you have a 7/16 inch nut. So deep socket recommended. Stick that on the nut back down there and just take it out. And there we go. Now the footwell's loose. We're not going to take it out just yet. We're going to pull this rear fender off first, and that'll make this come out easier. Okay, so for the rear fender, we have these 4 screws here, and these are a 3/8 size. We then also have some Torx bits, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They are a T27 size. And then under here, we also have two more. One there, one there. This can probably stay. We just need to unplug it from the back, most likely. And then under here, I don't think there's anything else under here. Nope. That should be it. Let's just get these taken off. Okay, well, now that we've got everything out of the way, let's get in here and have a look. So once again, I'm hoping to not have to take off the plastic, to take off the gas tank, to be able to adjust the valves in here. So we're gonna do our best to try to do that. So a few things you have to do. You have to remove your crankcase timing cover here. You don't have to remove this cover. I have a gasket for this in case I need to, but we'll see. And then of course you have to remove the valve cover. There we go, the valve cover here. It also will be easier and helpful to go ahead and pull the spark plug, which is there. So we'll go ahead, pull the spark plug out. That'll make the engine easier to turn over so we can make sure we have it timed at the top dead center. So the tricky part about doing all this is getting a camera in here. So I'm gonna do my best. First, let's get the spark plug out of the way, and I'm just gonna reach in here with some long pliers and pull that. And I've gone ahead and cleaned up a bit with some brake parts cleaner. This is a good time to have a look at the, toolkit that comes with these, which I do have. And it comes with, obviously a spark plug wrench, but it's actually got the rubber thing inside so we can stick it in there, grab it, and get it out of there. Put that in the hole, bump the camera, make sure it's pushed down onto the spark plug. This would be neat. There we go. And this should work. Oh yeah. Groovy. Perfect. And let's have a look at the spark plug. She's a little rich, but not too bad. I do have another one that's already pre-gapped and ready to go. I don't really know if I want to go ahead and put it in. Probably will. Okay. Well, let's hope I can do this. And find my words. No, let's hope I can do this, not bump the camera too much. It's going to be hard to see. I believe there are like 8 of these little 8mm head size bolts or screws, whatever term you like. And I'm using the smallest ratchet I have, hoping it will let me do this. Okay. We're going to stop right here and go ahead and take off the front plastic and the gas tank so that we can get to the top of this engine a lot easier. So far I've removed 2 bolts, can't get my big giant gorilla hands in there. Maybe if you have smaller hands or you're just better at it than me, you can get in there, but we're just going to take this thing the rest of the way apart, get the rest of the plastic out of the way so we can get the gas tank out of the way and make this job a bit easier. Okay. as you can probably tell by now, this didn't exactly go the way I have planned, and you can tell that by, you know, just looking at that mess there behind me. So as I was doing this, I was remembering that the last time I tried to do this, I had the same problem. And that was I couldn't really get the front fender off without fully probably taking the handlebars and everything completely off the rig. And I don't think I need to do that. However, with everything situated like this, I am able to lift the gas tank up probably enough to give me the clearance I need to go ahead and get in there and take care of that. So I'm going to find something to wedge here to keep this lifted up so I can, you know, do the work here. Okay. So far, all of these little bolts are the same length, so that'll make putting it back together a little easier, since I won't have to try to remember which ones went where. They're all the same. And one more right here. Okay, that should be all of the bolts, which means this should now come off, which it just did. Great. Probably take it out the bottom. Looks like the gasket's coming with it. That's also good. Okay. And there's our valve cover. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the parts washer and let it get clean. Okay, I'm not sure how far I can get this camera in here, but you can just, there we go, make out the rocker arms, the top of the valve stems. Those ones on top, of course, are the intakes, and then the exhaust valves you can see, well, probably, I don't know, might be able to see them from down here. It's hard to say. I can kind of see them on the camera screen. Anyway, that's where they all live, and we're going to take off this timing cover bolt here, and then we can make sure we have all of the timings set properly so we can then check the valve clearances. So this little plug right here, this is the crankcase timing cover plug. It's good and snug. Okay. Now down inside here there's a timing cover, which is going to be really hard to see, and we're going to rotate the engine by using the pull starter cord, which should be easy to pull since we pulled the spark plug out. So I'm going to put this light on here and try to find the timing mark. Okay, there's the timing mark, and so I'm not sure if you're able to see those two dots. They're supposed to be parallel with this surface of the head that the valve cover goes on. Those don't quite look parallel to me, but then when I also look at the photograph in the book, it looks exactly like that, which means not quite parallel. And then down in here, which this will be really hard for you to see, down in here you can kind of see just inside the hole to the top, there's a mark, and that mark lines up with the hole. So this to me means we're top dead center. Okay, so at top dead center, on all four valves, we should have 0.006 clearance between the rocker arm adjuster and the top of the valve. 0.006 is 0.006, and I happen to have a feeler gauge already set to that. And that is here. And you can make out 0.006. Okay, just love using some of these old feeler gauges. I've never bought feeler gauges in my life, but these are from Dad, and I always like it when I get to use Dad's old tools. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to use this screwdriver to point at what I'm talking about. So this here, this is the adjuster for the valve clearance. Right here is the top of the valve spring. So what we're going to do is slide that feeler gauge right here between the top of the shaft and the bottom of the adjuster, and at 0.006 we should feel some resistance, but it should move. And the other, before we do that, I am going to grab the rocker arms, make sure that they have just a tiny bit of play. They are tight. The intakes are tight. Okay, the exhausts feel like they have play, just a hair, but these intakes, they feel really, really snug. Yep. The feeler gauge is in there. It fits in there. It's dragging on both sides, but I'm able to move it back and forth in there. So the exhaust valves, they feel good. Excellent. Those intakes, though, they are not good. So what I need is the top of the adjuster is just like a Phillips, and then I need a wrench to go on that nut. And I believe this is all going to be metric because this is a Fuji engine. So 10 millimeter? I don't know. Let's find out. It is 10 millimeter. Excellent. I don't think you can see what I'm doing, and I don't know if I move the camera that you're going to be able to see what it is that I'm doing. Well, I've got a couple of different things I can try this with. So I know that the wrench fits. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the intake valve away from me first. I'm going to just loosen the outer nut, which is the lock nut. I'm going to loosen that. Now I'm going to try something I've never tried before, and that's these screwdriver things that are, well, that doesn't fit in the slot. That's too big. Okay. And that could be why she's down on power a little bit, you know. I know she's only a 400, but this little 400's not really having a lot of power. And when I did this on the 500, it really woke it up. Now here's what's curious about these rigs and these valves. You know, usually when you go to adjust valves, you have to tighten them. But with these Polaris valves, from what I understand and what I've read, is that these valves stretch, which makes them tighter. I don't know if that's correct. Stretch. I don't know if the word stretch is correct. They change shape a little bit, the stems, which make these tighter instead of looser, because normally these things will loosen up over time, not tighten, like in a car. So when I did this to the old 500 Polaris, it really woke it up. It actually had more power after I did this adjustment. So now I can feel just a hair of play. Let me loosen the other one because, oh no, these rockers are independent. Okay, now I can feel just a hair of play. If I turn it back, no play. Turn it out a little bit. There's play, just a tickle. Now let's throw the, let's put the feeler gauge in there and see what it says. The feeler gauge feels pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is try to lock it down where it is. And after I do that, see, it turned. So after I lock this down where it is, then I will try it again. If I can hold that right there. Okay, so let's get the wrench back in here. Let's get my angled screwdriver back in here and try to tighten this down. Okay, now that's tightened down, and let's check with the feeler gauge once more. Perfect. Okay. And just a hair play, you can hear it. Or maybe you can't. Okay. And now let's do the one closest to us. And see, I'm trying to get the feeler gauge. It won't even go in. This is one of those things. If you feel comfortable, you have just some regular tools. You can do this at home. Save yourself a lot of money, because this kind of work, you can see it's time consuming. So there's a lot of labor charge you're going to end up paying if you pay somebody to do this, or just do it yourself. It's not terribly difficult. The hardest thing is just getting to it. Once you've gotten to it, it's pretty easy. Okay, now we're loosening this, still no play. So these are way too tight. The other thing we'll do is, after we're done, before we put it back together, we'll cycle it over a couple of times and then check it again. Okay, let's get the feeler gauge. It's still a little snug. Can't really get it in there. Okay. Still a little snug. There we go. That looks good. Okay, so I'm gonna, just with my fingers, move the lock nut, make sure this thing is still good. Okay. Now, find my wrench. There it is. Get my wrench back on it. See if I can do it from down here. Needs to be held right there. Okay, now let's check it with the gauge again. There we go. Now it's going through easily, but dragging, which is what you want. I'm going to rotate this engine all the way over and check them again. I didn't mean to rotate it that fast. That caused a little bit of poof to come out the spark plug hole. Okay. Let's check them again. Yep. Yep. Okay, I think we're done. Now we just need to put it all back together. I'm gonna wipe down the surface, the mating surface of the valve cover gasket real quick with a cloth, a lint-free cloth, and get that cleaned up so we can get ready to put that back together. Something else I'm gonna do, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's some material around the edge of this mating surface of the valve cover here. So I'm gonna just get it with a little die grinder action with a pad on it and smooth this out. Now you want to be careful. This sponge pad doesn't look like much, but it will take metal right off. So you just want to go real lightly. Don't put any pressure. You just want to get this old junk off of here. You don't want to reshape the thing. There we go. And that looks way better. And then I'm going to go ahead and just hit this with the brake cleaner just to knock off any shavings or whatever might be in here. Whatever just went in there, we don't want it in our engine. There we go. Okay, so putting this back on, you know, it's just the same as taking it back off. It'll probably go a lot easier and quicker. I'm going to go ahead and do that, but before I do, the one thing I want to mention, when you're putting these little 8mm screws into this aluminum, you know, I like to use a quarter drive ratchet and I like to feel it by hand, because the worst thing you can really do is go at it, put your whole back into it, and just break the bolt off into the head or the block, depending on where you're working. Or you can strip the hole out because it is aluminum. So again, I like to put them all in and just really feel it by hand with the 1/4-inch drive ratchet. And then you can go back and torque it if you want. These don't take a lot of torque. With the 1/4 drive ratchet, you're probably going to do more than the torque wrench, but there is torque specifications and or settings. Anyway, that I can share with you. I'll put it up on the screen right here, and you can do it that way if you want. Again, I'm just going to do it by hand. No need to show it to you. I'll catch back up with you once I've got this put back together and it's time to go ahead and do the oil change on it. Okay, back to work. Okay, you can see, have the valve cover placed back on there and have the rest of the front of the rig all put back together. Didn't feel like I needed to show that to you. You've already seen it when we took it apart. Just play it backwards if you want to see it go back together. So now it's time to change the oil. That's not too difficult on these, especially since we have it mostly taken apart. So first I'm gonna, there we go, loosen up this oil fill and dipstick thing. Just leave it like that so that way air can get in. So I don't know, I'm hoping you can see it on the camera, but at the tip of the screwdriver there is the oil drain plug for the crankcase. It's not particularly difficult to get out. It's usually more difficult to put back in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this. The easiest way, if I can do this without bumping the camera, is to come up from the bottom. And hopefully you can see I've got my wrench on there. And it's snug. There we go. There we go, we've got it loose, and I have just a storage container underneath here for draining the oil, because my giant oil drain pan doesn't really fit. And unfortunately, there's no good way to do this. And when it drains, it's going to get all over the frame, because Polaris. Sometimes you can get a magnet on there and turn it with a magnet. Other times what I've done is just put a little pressure on the head. That way I can turn it. This also works for putting it back in, by the way. And it's starting to go. Do the drain thing. There we go. And as I mentioned, it goes all over the frame, and that's normal. While that's draining, I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the oil tank, and we'll get it started. Okay, so with our new washer installed on the drain plug, now the fun part of trying to put it back in. So the way I've done this sometimes is go ahead and put the drain plug on my wrench, set it on here, take a screwdriver and hold pressure on the head of it, and just very slowly and carefully try to start it. And eventually the threads will align and it will start, and then you can put it in. It may take a few tries to get it. As we see here, it took me a few tries. And there we go. So now we just need to snug it up carefully. And go ahead and get this nice and tight so it crushes that washer up against the crankcase, makes a nice seal. Now I'm going to put the drain pan back under here because I'm going to hit the frame with brake cleaner. Along with right there. Yep. Unfortunately, there's no way to keep that oil that I'm aware of from getting all over that frame. Let's go ahead and get this filter out of here. And I picked up a new little filter wrench. This Aries thing on the Amazon website. Let's see how this thing works. So supposedly, you just put that on there and well is how that works. Okay. I like to put a little Tupperware dish under here because this is going to leak. Let's go ahead and take this off. And there we go. So that oil looks pretty good under there. It's a good thing. And there we go. Gasket is off, and you can see that. And then I like to go in here and just clean off this mating surface, the gasket surface. And then, of course, use some of the used motor oil to wet your gasket. That's fine. Now, oddly, I was able to find a Wix filter to fit these. This is the number 51358. Supposedly, I've never put a Wix on a quad before, but we're going to do it. That seems like it threads on there just fine. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. And then I'm going to hit those places that, you know, made a mess real quick. There we go. Let's pull that out. There we go. I'm going to spray the frame over there. Okay. And then we go get a marker. You want to keep track of when you're servicing your vehicles, whether it's a car or whatever. So we're going to do the same here. Probably should have wrote this on here before, but it is Feb 24, and we have 234 hours. There, that way we know exactly when it was serviced and how many hours were on it when we serviced it. So I've mentioned it before, you know, Polaris, way back in the day, on their oil, they used to tell you have to use their oil, but they wouldn't tell you, you know, the thickness, the spec on the oil, because their oil bottles didn't have it on it. But I don't know what happened. I don't know if somebody sued them. I don't know if there was a lawsuit or a warranty claim or whatever. But anyway, I don't know, 15 years or so ago, they started putting the weights on their bottles of oil and telling you in the owner's manuals what it needs. So what they need is synthetic 5-weight 50. That's it. Polaris oil is like 20 bucks a quart. I'm going with Lucas oil. Got this over at the O'Reilly. It's 5-weight 50 synthetic. 4-stroke oil, and it says side-by-side UTV, and to me UTV means ATV, so this should be perfect. And these engines, just like the newer engines and all the older engines, take 2 quarts, just 2 quarts, and you do want to go in kind of slow because the way this oil system here works with that oil tank, and it's got to filter its way into the engine from the oil tank. If you go too fast, it will come back out at you, guaranteed. All right, so valves are adjusted, oil's been changed, filter's been changed, new oil's been put in. Let's get into this rear fender thing. So this is what I'm looking at. This stuff is coming off, and well, it's not going to be much longer, and it won't be doing any good at all. Okay, I've got us a couple of rags. I'm going to get a marker, and I'm going to kind of mark this stuff so I know how far to go. Might as well take this off too. What we don't want, we don't want this plastic melting from the hot exhaust. We experienced that with the other quad, the 500, which some of you may have seen, and we ended up having to replace the plastic altogether. We don't want to do that because, while that plastic was new, you can't buy this plastic anymore unless you get a used one. And even if you find a used one in good shape on the interwebs, by the time you get it, in different methods of packaging, because some people think they package things well, and maybe they don't, what you might end up with is something that's not very good. So we're just going to take care of this one. That other spray, by the way, is dollar store, totally awesome. It works okay. And now this is Goof Off, or whatever it is. Goof Off. Try to get any adhesive on here off. It's kind of working. Oh, I must have a cut on my finger because that burns. You can use whatever cleaner you like. I just want to make sure that we put new stuff on here that it's going to stick. I think that'll do. Okay. So I've got a couple of different choices here. First, I've got some actual aluminum tape. We'll probably use this in some places. And then I have this heat shielding here, which is actually made to do this. And this stuff is quite sticky. Used it on the 500, and in the places I used it, it worked really well. So I think we'll probably use a combination of this stuff. I think this tape I'll use up here because this is similar to thickness of the stuff that came off, and then probably layer this other stuff on. I don't know, we'll see. So I figure I can take this and stick it to here and just trim it. Oh, you're not even watching. Okay, so I think I'm going to take this aluminum tape. We're just going to put it right on here. Get it into the crack there. And we can let that go over the top. That's okay. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. It's going to kink a little bit right there. And I think that's going to be okay. I think if we get this, we'll work it in kind of like this. Of course, we'll cut here, and then we'll put another strip that comes the rest of the way. Well, that should be good enough. You know, we'll just put it back together and keep an eye on it. I'm going to put y'all in fast forward motion again as we put this here quad ATV four-wheeler. Anyway, as we put Ruby back together. All right, really, there's just one last thing before we can call this thing done. We've got to put these things back on, and I'll show you how that goes. Both sides are the same, so we'll just show you one. This is the more difficult side because of the fuel valve being right there. When you push on it weird, it leaks. Okay, and then back here, you just push it behind it and then pull it up. And that's it. That's how these go on these older rigs. Okay. Well, let's see how we did, shall we? Okay. Turn that on. Neutral. Turn the gas on. Pull the choke. As you know, she's a little cold-blooded. Well, there she is. You know, when she's been sitting like that, the carburetor's dry, it takes a little bit for that gas to get up to the carburetor, but I'm also a little astounded. She never idles cold. Huh. Well, she sounds pretty good. And that throttle response is quite a bit nippier than what I'm used to, so I'm thinking those intake valves were just a little too snug like we saw. Yeah, man. Yeah, I'd say she feels pretty good. I think that's job done. Hello and welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures and back to the shop, and this time to Ruby Sue. So as you know, if you watched the last video, we're getting ready for a big trip, and well, as I'm going through the quads, ATVs, four-wheelers. Anyway, as we're getting the quads ready, you know, we went ahead and did a service on the chicken hawk over there, did the oil, the transmission fluid, the front diff fluid, all went seemingly well there. But getting Ruby Sue ready back here, we've noticed that the CV boots on the front axles, well, they're destroyed. And, you know, instead of taking the cheap route of just replacing the boots, we're going to take the slightly more expensive route of replacing the entire front axles because the rig's 22 years old, and sure, might as well go ahead and do that. So like I was saying, we're getting into Ruby Sue here. You remember the old girl. She's a Good little quad. But we're going to go ahead and replace the front axles, and we're going to do that with this Niche, whatever, that brand from the Amazon website. And well, you can get a pair of them. I think it's about $110, which is pretty good. And they're pretty much, ready to go. Everything's pre-greased. Obviously, that's pre-greased because it kind of has to be. It's sealed. And they actually pre-grease the U-joint for you. That's nice. But they don't give you new roll pins. And on this machine, these just don't slide into the splines with a snap ring. Actually have a roll pin, so you have to have a tool to push the old one out and push the new one in. And we'll get into that later when we start putting it together. But, first things first, got to take the wheels off. So I know you all see me do this probably 112 times by now, so we're just going to go ahead and bang off both front wheels and catch back up to you. So if you've watched the review we did of old Ruby Sue here, you'll have caught on to the major difference in this quad from the other Sportsmans. But if you didn't watch that, first, go back and watch it. It's pretty good. But second, the front end on Ruby Sue, because of its age, is quite different. Most Polaris Sportsmans that are from years probably, I think, 2005 on up, the front drive system for the all-wheel drive is activated at the differential. Electricity goes there. When you push the buttons, some witchcraft happens, and it engages the front drive. But on these older units, the front drive is always active at the differential, and the witchcraft happens down at each hub individually at the front. So the hubs are built very different, and let me show you. So first you can see the differential back in there, kind of pointing at it. Notice it's a lot smaller than what you'd see on the more modern rigs. But as you back up, you can see you've got your wiring here that does the magnetic witchcraft down inside the hub. And you can see the front hub is quite different. You actually do have to service this. And this has been serviced recently. Last year, I think it is. You don't have to service them all that often. I think about the same as everything else. You do have to fill it with oil, and there is a specific oil that goes in this, and I do have it, and I'll show it to you later when we get to that point. But we've got a lot to take off, so we have to, of course, take the cap off, let the oil fall all over the floor and make a mess, pull bearings and everything else out of there. We also have to disconnect, the steering tie rod here, and we're going to have to disconnect, the A-arm from the bottom. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started with the hub, so that way it makes a more controlled mess on the floor as opposed to just swinging everywhere. Okay. All right, so like I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and start by opening up the hub here. We're just going to take this cover off. That's 3 Torx T25 things. Seems like I need a parts tray. I'll come back for that. And then we'll just there's a little slot here. Maybe you can't see it. See right here, you've got a little slot, which is nice. You can stick a screwdriver in there and give it a little how you doing. And it gets it started for you. There's another one right here. That was nice. They were thinking about service. That's good. Always applaud a manufacturer that thinks about service. Okay. And the O-ring looks like it's good coming out with it. And there goes some juices. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean up this cap here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. O-ring's in good shape, so that's good. We don't need to replace the O-ring, which is a good thing because I didn't buy any new ones. Okay. And the smell is strange because it doesn't smell like oil. What it smells like is just grease. And I know that's a weird thing to bring up and say, but you know. Now you may have also noticed that when I turn this, it doesn't turn the axle. To turn the axle, this is going to sound weird, grab the rear tire and you can turn the axle. I'll show you. There we go. So you can turn the axle, but you have to do it with the rear tire. And I only did that so I can get to the cotter pin easier. Came out pretty good. You are going to want to go ahead and replace your cotter pin with a new one when you put it back together. Just a suggestion. And now we get to figure out what size that castle nut is, because you know Polaris love consistency, meaning they hate consistency. I'm going to start with the American sizes first. Nope. This one, too loose. That's whatever that is. That's a 1 inch. Here's a 15/16. Oh, that fits good. So they did do an American size castle nut. That's good to know. It's also helpful to try to get this broken loose and get it off if you leave the brakes there so you can lock them. Then you can break this loose, which honestly wasn't all that tight. I think the torque spec on this is not a lot of torques. I think it says specifically, it says the words not a lot. Okay, so we're going to want to save all the bits that come out of here. And actually, before we take that all the way off, let's go ahead and pull the brake caliper off. And that's just a 1/2 inch, you know, a 1/2 inch bolt on the back side of the caliper. Let's go ahead and take that off. I'll show you where that's at. That's actually right here, where my finger's touching it. Okay. Gonna need an extension. Don't need the brake locked anymore. There we go. Okay, don't lose the washers. You get a lock washer and a not so lock washer, just a flat one. Don't lose those. Okay, very good. Give this a little bit of a wiggle and off it comes. And we'll just, you know, that's fine. Okay, now we'll go ahead and finish what we were working on here and take the castle nut away. And we're going to clean it as if we're going to reuse it. The new axles do come with new castle nuts and flat washers, but you know, just in case, JIC, we're going to keep those. Okay, and here we've got the axle nut washer. And then we should be able to pull that off, bearing fell out, and since it fell in the pan, we're going to go ahead and want to clean that. And on the back side, the bearing stayed, but we've got a nice stream of fluid all over the brake rotor, so remind me to go ahead and clean that before we put it back together. Bearings overall seem okay. Not like I can do anything about it right now anyway. I don't have any new ones, so it's just fine, I'm sure. Bearings made in the USA. Timken. Not sure if you can see that. Timken. There's a Timken part number. USA. And these are the originals, so that's good to know. Okay. Yep, feels okay. And now the next bearing. And I think these are the same part. However, this one doesn't say anything on it. So maybe they're not the same part. And then this guy, this is your actual drive clutch here. Unless you're having problems, I recommend just leave this alone. You know, don't mess with it. We're just going to set it on a rag over here. Then there's more. You've got this ring, which does a thing. It has a name. Don't really recall what the name of this is, but it does do a thing. And then we've got yet another bearing. Wonderful. This is also a Timken. Right there. Oh, you can't see it. Timken. There's another part number. USA. Neat to see Timken bearings in here. And I do believe that is all of the bits for now. And I'm going to go ahead and scoop this under a little bit more, because now we're going to go ahead and take off the steering and take this off so we can get, you know, this has to move so you can get the axle out. All right. So I've gone ahead and removed the cotter pins from the steering tie rod and the bottom of the the hub where it goes to the... Look, if y'all need a video to remind you how to remove cotter pins, then maybe this isn't for you doing this kind of work. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and take those off, and you're going to see firsthand what I talk about. When I talk about Polaris and their love of consistency, no, inconsistency. Their love of inconsistency when it comes to the different flavors and variations of bolts and nuts that they like to use. We'll start here with the lower, the A-arm joint where it goes to the, the thing. That is a solid 9/16 right there. But then when we come up here, this is 16 millimeters, and that is 15 millimeters. Can anybody explain to me why, from a factory, you want a mixture of American and not so American metric things on the same machine? And look, it's not just me being dumb, right? 9/16 is what fits best down there. 15 and 16 is all that fits on the other ones. So, and I've encountered this on all of the Polaris rigs, the Ruby Sue, the Hawkeye, even the old 500 had that mix all over it, to the point where the bolt would be SAE and the nut would be metric. I don't even understand how that's possible, but Polaris finds a way. Okay, anyway, we're going to go back to taking this apart. So I'm going to start here with the steering, because that makes sense to me. And actually, that's fine. What are we going to do with the brake thing? Let's just put it over there. Let's start with the steering because that makes sense to me. And what did I say it was? Oh, I'm sorry. I said the bottom was 16. Sorry, this is 17 millimeters here, and this is 15 millimeters on the top. So get our 15 millimeter wrench here and our 17 millimeter wrench here. Well, I feel like I'm going to just use an impact there. Had to turn the Hercules up to power mode 3, but she did it. And of course I dropped that right there in the sauce. Let's grab that. And that should just lift out of there. Oh, dropped that right in the sauce too. Okay, save the nut for later. Yes. Okay, now for the bottom. There's an oil seal in here that didn't come out like I thought it would. I'm thinking it might be on the back side. Guess we'll find out in a minute. Let's go ahead and get that bottom thing off. And what did I tell you that was? 9/16. Probably is tight. What was that? It was just the brakes. We don't need those. Well, let's see if we can just push this out of the way and go back in with our Hercules friend. Oh, that just came right off. Groovy. It's because I broke it loose with all the torque supplied by the arms. Okay. Now, how do we separate this? Can we just give it a shake? Or, well, let's get this back under here. Or do we need to tap on it? I say we need to tap on it. Well, let's go ahead and also hang up the brake caliper. It's making me nervous just hanging around down here. So let's get a hook on it and hook it to something. There, that makes me feel a little better. At least it's kind of hooked on something. And I'm being careful not to hit the threads. Don't want to do that. That's doing absolutely nothing. Wonder if I just get a pry bar on the bottom of this hub and on there and maybe? Maybe not. Am I ruining something? Probably. Is there rubber under there? Oh, yeah, see. Don't want to ruin the rubber. Well, I suppose I could pry against the old axle. We're going to replace that anyway. There we go. Okay. A-arm is dropped, and now we can potentially just slide this the rest of the way out. In theory. Should we have loosened the nut up here at the top? Maybe. I actually kind of think we don't need to if we can take that out. Meaning the other end, and we can just pull it Well, I reckon we'll go ahead and pull the axle. All right, so as you can see, I've just about got that roll pin lined up in a way where we can get access to it. So if I go back, you realize there isn't any real good way to get good access to that roll pin, but this seems like it should be okay. Now in the service manual it says, remove the roll pin with a drift. I don't know what a drift is, but I found this neat tool, on the interwebs. Found it on the Amazon website, but I think you can get it from other places. It's made by Quad Logic, and it's a roll pin punch thing, and it can go on an air hammer. It's quite long, see? It's quite long, so I guess if it had a hard to reach spot, it would work. But we're gonna go ahead and try it. It says you can use an air hammer or just a regular hammer. I'm gonna try a regular hammer first and try to go easy, and then if it shows any signs of disagreeing with me, well, then we're gonna choose violence. All right, so like I said, we're gonna try to go at this with a regular hammer and kind of see what happens. Well, it seems like it's kind of moving. But would it be quicker if we grab the air hammer? It would also be helpful if I hit the end of the tool here, but it is going. So maybe we'll just go ahead and do it the nice and easy way. The problem I'm running into, though, is I can't get a nice straight line at that roll pin. There's no way to achieve that, with all the parts that are included with the final assembly of one of these quads. Well, let's see how far we can get it. I can feel it poking out the backside. Yep. Maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch. Yeah. But is there another way to get a better angle at this? I don't know. That seems like it's bottomed out. So now, how do I finish it? Can it come from the bottom? No. The top? No, my tool is just, well, it's long. I'm wondering if I can come from the top, from way up top. I don't know. Let me see. I have updates. So the quad itself has chosen violence. So I could get a better angle. I thought, well, I'll just take off the rack and get it from the top. No, that didn't work. There's no way to get it from the top. So then I decided, well, what else can I get out of the way? So I took this off. There's wires apparently attached to it. Fortunately, it didn't break any of the wires, but I've had to unplug them all, and I have to remember how they all plug back in, because I don't know what they do. I'm sure it's something. Who knows? But with that also comes, the screen for the radiator that scoops the air and stuff. But on the bright side, I think I have a much straighter angle at this. I might be able to finish it. I don't know. So we're just going to go ahead and give that a try and see if that makes it any better. Well, I heard the roll pin fall out. My thing here is stuck, my tool. Should be able to get that back out though. Maybe. Oh yeah. There we go. Sorry for the racket, but the roll pin has come out. I don't know where it went exactly. There's a piece of foam. But we should be able to get the axle out now and finish the disassembly portion of this project here. Okay, so I think now we just pull this off the splines. Or not. Oh, ow, yep. Didn't need that skin. Well, how do you... There we are. And then, of course, like I mentioned, we've got a bearing here. We want to keep that. That's important. There's the roll pin. So you do not want to reuse these. You do need to replace them because when you take it out, you ruin it. And it's probably not as grippy as it once was. So we do have new ones. Okay, well, you synced it. Anyway, you saw the axle come out. And let me show you a few things I'm looking at. First, you can see that CV boot, it's ruined. And I know, like I said in the beginning, you can just replace the boot. That's true. However, after I pulled that out and I'm moving it around, wiggling the joint around, it was grinding a bit inside. So, new axles, here we are. Cleaned out the hub. It looks pretty good. You can see down in there. All the races and seals look like they're in real nice shape. So I've gone ahead and cleaned up the inside of the hub at this side. And then I discovered the ball joint, I guess it is, at the bottom of the strut. On the back side, if I turn this around, you can see there's a bit of a Zerk fitting right there. But there's a seal, this seal, that goes right up here. So after we bolt that on and put that together, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and squirt some grease in there because there was really none in there. Okay, so now we're just going to work on putting the new axle. I'm going to fall over because I'm trying to balance on my feet here. Put the new axle in and hopefully that goes just as well. It should. Okay, so we're going to try to be a little more graceful with getting this in than we were getting the old one out. So can this go back in here? Nope. Can we maybe do that? Oh, before I go, let's make sure. Yep, we do have our new bearing on, or the bearing back on here where it goes. But can I get it through all of here? Oh yeah, that kind of worked. And then we do have to line this guy up with the, well, let me come over there. Okay. I don't know why this isn't wanting to turn, but we do have to line this up with the hole, for the roll pin thing. And it went on, but did it line up? I don't know. Went too far. Yeah, that's lined up. You have to take my word for it because I'm not going to. Yeah, sure, I'll show you. Right in there, that's lined up. That's what you need. All right. Now we take our new pin, and this is kind of, I'm thinking this might get a little tricky, but we've got to start it in the, in the axle there. Can we just do this like that? And then start to tap it and drop it down in the oil pan. Okay. Is there a direction it prefers? Probably not. Try it again. Oh, it's starting to go now. Okay. looks like we've got it lined up with the hole, so we should just be able to push this the rest of the way through. Yep, looks like it's going. And that's exactly what we want. Ow, that was my thumb. Okay, and that feels like it's about it. So let me bring you back over. Let's turn that light down. There we go. So now you can see we've got the roll pin, hammered back into place, and it sticks out about the same on this side as it does on the back side, and it's about a single millimeter, or roughly a 1/16 of an inch. Yeah, I don't know if that's accurate, but closer to the millimeter mark anyway. But it sticks in there. It looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and finish reassembling the hub bit. Okay. So then we've got a bearing that goes in there. Like I was saying, this part, this flat bushing or O-ring, has these tabs that are facing, all up. And your clutch here, your electrical, magnetic, magical clutch here, has these 3 indents. And these sit nicely into those indents. And it's very important to remember which direction you took this off, because that's the direction it must go back on. And so you just put it on the splines, and there we go. And then from here, we get another bearing that goes there. Okay. Then we need the hub, which means I have to go over there and get it. It's also important to clean off your brake rotor, because if you did it like me, you got oil all over it. Anyway, we're going to slide this back on. Yep. And then we need another bearing, like so. And we need washer. Nope. Yep. And castle nut. And I am using the new washer and castle nut from the new axle. So that's on. It's only finger tight. I'm going to go ahead and grab a rear tire and rotate it, and I want to make sure that this seems to rotate freely. Ouch. Is it turning? Are you watching? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I believe next we're just going to go ahead and, like I said, we're going to leave this finger tight here, mainly because, the wind is just blowing a bunch of crap in the shop. Anyway, mainly because we're going to come back and there's a specific torque procedure for this. Whatever. But we're going to go ahead and reinstall. Whoops, we almost forgot the little rubber seal that goes on the bottom where the bolt is, and feed this up through there like that. Put the nut on it. We're just going to run that on by hand as well. I don't want to overdo it just yet. Let's go ahead and put the steering doohickey back on. And that, if you remember, had 2 washers. One went on here, then it went in the hole. And then one went on the bottom, and like that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up just because I want to. There we go. Let's see, can I tighten this one up? Is it going to let me? Yes. Let's hit that a little bit more. Just a how you doing. Okay, and then now I'm just going to go ahead and put the brake caliper back on. If I can get it unhooked from the way I have it hanging back here. Okay. Well, did somebody push the brake lever while I wasn't looking, or there it goes. Okay. Don't forget, this is the bolt split washer flat washer combo. Okay. Brakes are reattached. Now finally we're going to get into this torque procedure for this thing. Okay. So first you find your tiny little torque wrench that does thing in inch pounds. And then you put all the adapters you need to go from quarter to 3/8 to half because, well, that takes a big socket. And that just looks ridiculous. And you set your torque wrench to 165 inch-pounds. It's important. Now, it says torque this to 165 inch-pounds. There we go. Click, click, click. Now, it says rotate the axle, not the hub, but the axle several times. I guess that means 3 or more, by turning a rear wheel. So by turning the rear wheel, if you remember, it turns the axles in the front. So we're going to do that several times, it says. I hope you're keeping counting, because I'm not. I'm just back here turning the wheel. Now it says to loosen it. So now we loosen it. Okay. Then now finally, it says to torque it now to 124 foot-pounds. Sorry, inch-pounds. Inch-pounds. Do not do foot-pounds. So figure out how to set your tiny torque wrench to 124 inch-pounds. There we go. Okay. Now we install the cotter pin. Now it does say if you can't put the cotter pin in at this torque setting, then you may tighten it until you can. However, you are not to exceed 144 inch-pounds in doing so. But it looks like we're going to be able to stick our cotter pin right through there. Now the book is very specific on which way you bend your cotter pin. It wants you to take the long side, and I know there's many people that debate on the proper way to do cotter pins, so I'm going to do what the book says. It says take the long side and pull that up and over the top. And then the short side is supposed to bend down. And look, this isn't me giving you advice. This is coming from the shop manual for the Polaris, okay? Like I say in the intro, you know, follow the instructions from whatever you're doing. Don't listen to me. There we go. Now we can put the cap back on. If I can find a cap. Oh, I found the cap, and it's got a bunch of junk in it. We're going to have to clean that out. Yeah. A little bit of shop grade Windex. You know, aka it's brake cleaner. And I don't think it matters which way this goes back on, as long as it lines back up with the holes. And you don't want to force it into place without starting these, because you might do it crooked and then you can't turn it. There we go. So we're just going to run these in a little bit at a time. Then we're going to turn this over to make sure it's seated all the way around, and that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, so the hubs on these old machines, they take a very specific fluid, and that is this demand drive fluid, not to be confused with the AGL, otherwise known as the annoyingly expensive gear case lubricant, or the actual, transmission, or engine oil. Demand drive fluid. It's very specific for the hubs on this, and we'll go ahead and show you how to fill these up. Firstly, I'm going to use this syringe. It's the same one that you may have seen before. We used it to fill the transmission and the front gear case on the Chicken Hawk. It's been cleaned, and we'll reuse it here again as well. All right, so to fill it, first we're going to remove the fill plug, which is right here. It's oddly difficult to remove, meaning it's just the threads are snug is all I'm saying. In case you're wondering what size this is an American size. I don't remember what that is, 3/16 perhaps. But I'm sure if you've got a selection of these at home, you'll figure it out. Okay, and there's their plug. It's got a little magnet on it, which this one's relatively clean because we cleaned it when we had it apart. Sit that there. Just to make sure this is going to fit in the hole. The answer to that is yes. So now it wants you to put it at roughly a 4 o'clock position, but since you're on that side, we're going to put it at a roughly 10 o'clock position. So that's about 9 o'clock. We'll just say that that's about right. I guess I should have put some stuff in the syringe here. And I do not remember how much it takes, but the how much it takes is very simple. You slowly feed it in until it comes back out. And when it starts running back out, it's full. You got to feed it in slower than that, though, because it takes more than that. If you feed it in too quickly, it won't find its way the rest of the way, down inside where all the bearings and things live. You can see we've got a steady little stream. I'm going to shift it up just a skosh. Okay. I'm going to let that eat a little bit, maybe work it back and forth a little bit. And do it again. I think that's all she's going to take. Take our fill plug and do not cross thread that. You'll be sad. Okay. Now I'm going to get some shop grade Windex and go ahead and clean this up. That's pretty much it. I think I'm going to go ahead and shoot some grease into that, the steering thing down here before we close it up. But that's pretty much it. That spins pretty good, feels nice. We'll spin the wheel. Yep, and we should be able to hold on to that. Yep, feels pretty good. And that's pretty much how you do that. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. I'm just going to do it while you're not looking, because y'all probably don't want to see it in fast forward mode with music you don't want to hear. So I'm just going to come back to you when the whole thing's done. Okay, folks. So we got, the other side done, taken care of, put back together. Got the rack put back on, the front bumper that we had to take off, got that put back on. The other side, it went okay, but old Ruby Sue, well, she chose violence. So we met violence with more violence, if you know what I mean. But anyway, we're not 100% done. As I just said, we're done. Well, we're not 100% done. And, let me show you what I'm on about. Well, first you can see both of the old axles. Actually, it looks like only one was completely separated. This one looked like it would survive another season, maybe. It was starting to crack and come apart. This is the first one that you saw that was leaking grease everywhere. But these caps right here, well, turns out they're leaking. So we can't really, 100% finish. So, I went to putting fluid back in. You all saw me do that just a little bit ago. We put fluid back in that hub on the driver's side or left side. Or if you're standing in front of the quad, I guess that's the right side. But you know what I mean. And it looked fine. Buttoned it back up and started seeing fluid dripping out of the thing. So, it's leaking. That O-ring's no good. Well, what do you want? It's 22-year-old O-ring. So, ordered a couple new O-rings. You saw me do it. You don't need to see it again. We're not going to make a video just on putting that O-ring in because it's not going to be here for a couple of days. And, well, I need to get a video out. That's what I'm saying. Okay. What else? Put all new cotter pins everywhere. I don't remember if I showed you that. Probably did not. Put all new cotter pins in all the places. And then we also went ahead and greased the lower, I don't know if it's really a ball joint, but it kind of looks like a ball joint. But anyway, I'll show you kind of how she looks now. So this is the one y'all watched me put back together, and it's got a pan under it because it just keeps on dripping. So because of that, I'm not even going to bother. I just put the little screws back in here so I don't lose them. And, well, we'll put it back together when the new parts come in. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for today. I think you all get the point. We put new axles in Ruby. Hello and welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures. We're looking at Ruby Sue today. Them hubs, they're leaking. Went out to King of Hammers, noticed the leak when we put it on the trailer. Figured it'll be fine for the weekend, and it was. But now I'm pretty certain the hub's there, or at least that hub. It's probably dry and has no more hub oil in it. So that's today's project. We need to replace the seals and fill them back with oil. Now we're going to do both sides because it doesn't make sense to do one side just to have the other side start leaking. So we're going to do both sides. But before we get into any of that, we've got a digger out of the back corner back there. And as you can see, everything is filthy. So I'm going to go ahead and dig it out, get it out there, get it cleaned up, and then we'll get to working on old Ruby Sue. Stick around. Well, I've got Ruby pulled out. She's all cleaned up and, well, ready to be worked on. But, I got a little carried away when I was cleaning that one up. So I went ahead and cleaned up everything else. Spent the rest of the day just washing quads. Sure. All that is my way of saying it's about a week later since, just a few seconds or half a minute or however long ago it was when I told you what we were going to do. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get down here, have a look now that we've got it pulled out, and it's been clean for a week. And you'd have thought maybe that all of the hub juice would have come out of that hub, but no, it's still leaking. and you can see it sort of there. And it's not the O-ring that's leaking, it's actually leaking from behind and coming out and going all around and leaking off the back side of the wheel. I don't hear any grinding, so maybe we didn't end up ruining anything by letting all the hub juice out. You know, I think it only got ridden for like 5-6 miles when we had it out at King of the Hammers, so probably didn't do any damage. We hope not anyway. I'm sure it's fine. Well, the funniest thing just happened. I recorded a whole bit right now and didn't actually push record. Sounds about right. Anyway, for new seals, I found this kit from Moto 1988. I think that's what that says on the logo. It's kind of hard to read. From Amazon. And I'll show you why I went with an Amazon kit instead of, you know, Polaris OEM parts in a moment. This one seal, just one, for one wheel, from Polaris, it's 40 bucks. So if you're replacing all the seals, you know, that's going to end up being a lot of bucks for having the factory Polaris parts. But let me show you what I got in this kit here. So you have, I believe this is the backside of the hub seal, or it's the backside of the hub carrier, you know, in the strut seal. And you also have the other one, which is whichever one the other one is not. Plus you have the O-ring that goes on the hub cap. And you have two of them, one for each side, both driver's and passenger side of the quad. But also, we have all new bearings, all 8 bearings, because you know each wheel gets 2 bearings. And these actually come with the races as well, which I probably won't use the races from here because taking the races out can be difficult. But the bearings are the same part number bearings that are in it, so we'll go ahead and replace the bearings most likely. The whole kit, I want to say it was like 22 bucks from the Amazon. Now obviously you have to consider where this kit came from. But you know, I checked the reviews out and people said it worked fine on their Polaris Sportsmans that they did things on. So I said, sure, we'll go ahead and give that a try. All right. Let's see. Wheels off. I think the next order of business is let's get this brake off. Now I do think there was a lot of this oil that ended up on the brake rotor as well and may have soaked the pads. I don't know if we're going to do anything to try to rejuvenate those brake pads. We'll see. But, oh, where's my, I left all my tools way over there. Okay. Let's grab tools. Gonna need more than that. Okay. Oh, it fell. Okay. Yeah, the brake rotor, or no, brake caliper, is just held on with a couple of 1/2-inch bolts, and well, they're pretty easy to get to with a little impact here, which is nice. There we go. That can come off. And I wonder if these brake pads are soaked. And they're fairly new. They don't have a lot of miles or whatever on them. So I'm hoping that they'll be fine. We'll get to them later. Let's go ahead and get this cap off and get that draining. Remember, this is just your 3 Torx 25 screws. Oh, haha. I am kind of wondering a bit if this O-ring that's in here is bad. Because interestingly, what I'm not seeing is a lot of juice on the backside. Interesting. But we did have it leaking down the backside of the wheel, but that would make sense. It may just be this out here. Maybe we don't need to do all the seals and the bearings. Well, let's pop this off and see what we see. What I see is that this thing is stuck. Why? Here it comes. Goodness. There it comes. Why was it so stuck? And I think it's definitely been... Oh. Well, why is that? This O-ring is buggered. Is that our entire problem? Is just a buggered up O-ring here? Look, I'm not going to lie. That'd be kind of nice to not have to replace all the seals. Let's see if we can do a bit of a deeper inspection into this thing. All right, let's see if we can get you to focus in on here. Look at this O-ring. It is crunchy, and there's like a buggered up part right here. Hoping you can see it. But it's mangled right there. That's interesting. Let's clean this up. I've got obviously more O-rings, but I also have more O-rings even put away. Yeah, this O-ring is mangled, and I know it's not a very old O-ring. Well, that might just be all of our problem. I don't know. Okay, so in here you have two seals. You have a seal on the back side of the hub carrier where the axle goes through. There's also bearings in there, but there's a seal on the back side of this hub carrier. And I'll be honest, I don't think I see any signs of leakage there. And then there's another seal on the back side of the hub itself. And I don't think I see any leakage there either. We did see fluid on the back side of the wheel. You know, we saw that in the intro. But honestly, I think that's because it's been leaking along here. And this is where the wheel mounts. You can see we have fluid behind it. So, do we have a hub seal problem? I'm not real sure. We have new seals. But I think the bearings are fine. This rotates nicely. It doesn't feel like there's any contaminants in there, so we just had a leak where stuff was getting out, but stuff didn't appear to be getting in. So right now I'm just debating, do we just do the seals that are on the back side of just the hubs themselves? Let's just go ahead and take this hub off and just inspect it. All right, we have cotter pin. We have a cotter pin. We still have the cotter pin. Let's just twist it on out of there. Sure. Yeah, that worked. Why is the easiest thing the hardest thing? Come on. There we go. Now, always put in new cotter pins. This is just completely mangled now, so we definitely aren't going to reuse that. Anyway. Okay, our axle nut, which should be 15/16, and it is. And these are not very tight because they're not supposed to be very tight. And the washer, yep, give it to me. Got it. And just give it a little how you doing. And your front bearing comes out. Yeah, and this bearing looks good. But I think this might be the one that may have been replaced by somebody else at some point. Yeah, we know it's been replaced at some point because it's a Timken. And well, Polaris didn't spend that much money in putting Timken bearings on it. They did not put Made in USA bearings. Anyway. But this bearing is in really nice shape, so we're going to hang on to that, obviously. And then we just pull this guy off, and we're going to get more fluid. I think the seal on the back of this hub is probably fine. Here, I'll put some stuff down, and then I'll show it to you in a moment. But in the meantime, of course, we have the back bearing. And see, this one, that is not a Timken. It doesn't have a name. But bearing's still in nice condition, so it's fine. And then of course we have our Hillard clutch. This is the actual four-wheel drive unit right there. And our armature plate. And I'm just taking these off so they don't fall off, and then, you know, the Hillard clutch comes apart and all the rollers go flying everywhere. So I'm just going to take it off and set it over here. And there is, of course, bearing here, but we're not going to get into that. I'm more interested in the back side of the hub, and also noting that this all around here is dry and clean. So that's a good sign. So I'm hoping to be able to show this to you nicely. I don't know if there's any kind of gunk on the inside of here where that O-ring was set, but we're going to clean that up really good. But more importantly, you see the back, and here's that seal. Should we just go ahead and replace it and then be happy? Oh, good. Lovely. Oh yeah, there we go. That's a better view. And now we can see the entire seal. And this looks to be correct. And like I said, I'm just wondering, this is still doing the job. So do we want to replace it? Or just wait until it fails and then replace it later? So I think we've just got really lucky here, and we don't have to replace any of the actual hub seals or anything. They're in good shape and they have not been leaking. So I've gone ahead and I've just cleaned up the internal bits of the hub on both sides is what, you know, as good as I can. I also took the disc brake rotor off, cleaned it really nicely, made sure there's no debris on it, or oil, more importantly. And I've gone ahead and sprayed some brake cleaner under the brake pads. We'll see if those come around. They were kind of acting weird. We'll just clean the outside of this up again. This is, of course, where that seal goes. And we'll just reassemble. Now, I've done this a few times on the channel, but in case you've missed all the other times that I've done it on the channel, we're going to do it once again on the channel. So, first thing we have to do, make sure that bearing goes back in there. We're going to take our Hillard clutch, and it just sits right back up in there like that. Not fancy. Take a bearing. Yep. If you're putting new bearings on, you're going to want to make sure you've soaked, well, all this, the clutch, all the bearings, you're going to want to make sure you've soaked that stuff in the fluid. And we'll talk about that fluid in just a moment. Okay. And then we go ahead and we put the hub back on. That's still nice and smooth. Put our outer bearing. Of course, all these things. There we go. And you don't want to go too tight. Like right there, that just bottomed out, and that's fine. Before we get too much farther, I'm going to go ahead and put the brake back on so we have the ability to lock the brake to do torquing. There we go. Now, for the torquing procedure. The torquing procedure on these front hubs is very specific indeed. So first you torque it to 165 inch-pounds. Note I said inch, not feet, not Newton meters, inch-pounds. Not a lot of torque goes in this. Then you rotate it by turning the rear wheel. I like to rotate the rear wheel and then come up here and rotate the front wheel independently. Then you back it off and retorque it to 124 inch-pounds. We'll just do that right now. Okay, I've set the brake, and now we're going to go ahead and torque it. You can see I've got a stack here, so this is a 1/4 inch torque wrench because that's what you need to get down to the lower inch-pounds. With an adapter to 3/8, with an adapter to 1/2 with my 15/16 socket. There we go. That's 165 inch-pounds. We'll release the brake. And now we're going to rotate the rear tire, which should actually rotate the whole thing, because that is too much pressure. And this is a procedure just to get things to set. And see, it turns, but it's not free turning. Okay, so now we're going to back this off. And now we're going to reset our torque wrench to 124 inch-pounds. Whoops, we're still loosening. We don't want to loosen. Here we go. And for this, we shouldn't need to set the parking brake. There we go. 124 inch-pounds. And you'll see this rotates a lot smoother now. A lot easier. And now we just need to do the cotter pin. So we need to see if there's a direction that the cotter pin faces. Oh yeah, perfect. Right there. You can tell I do this a lot. I've got a cotter pin assortment because, man, it seems like I'm always doing stuff with cotter pins. This one looks a bit long. This one's just way too long, I think. I think this one will do. Yep, that'll do. I'm going to put it up from the bottom, though, for no reason. And I think I've also said, I don't know what the right way to do this is. From the factory, they kind of bend one over that way, and then they kind of push one in. Sometimes they wrap it around. I've not seen it real consistent, but I'm sure that'll do just fine. Just want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to get caught with this thing going on. No, that'll be fine. Let's once again, just wipe the inside of this hub. We're going to put a new O-ring, and we don't want the O-ring to be catching on anything. Let's get this old O-ring out of here. Yeah, that thing is just, let me see if I can There's our culprit right there. I don't know if you can see that. That is no bueno, senor and senores. Okay. I'm going to take the new O-ring and I'm going to try to get some oil on it. There we go. And this may be the step. Maybe this is what I didn't do last time. Maybe I didn't put oil on it to lubricate it going on so we didn't tear it. That could very well be. There we go. So now we're just going to put it on. Okay. All right. Now, again, I know I've showed this a few times. I'm not going to run all these in snugly to start. Just going to get them until they just touch the cap. And then now what I'm going to do is I like to just give a few turns on each one of these and just work my way around. 3 turns, that's probably good. And then I'll just continue this until it's fully seated. And you don't need to put a whole bunch of, torque on these. Don't do it till your wrist pops. That O-ring is what seals the oil to keep it from coming out, not how tightly this is installed. So you just want to run these down till they stop, and that's good enough. What's nice about these is they also have a magnet built in. So if you have any metal shavings or whatever, it collects here instead of ruining your bearings. Now for filling the hubs and making sure you have the right amount of juice in there, there is another very specific method and procedure to follow to do that. The book says put fluid in, back up, rewind. The book says turn it to either a 8 o'clock or 4 o'clock position, so that way the hole is not straight down, but down a little bit, about 1 o'clock, whatever. And then you fill it until it comes back out. It's very difficult to fill uphill, to fill a hole uphill. It's difficult. So what I like to do is make the hole straight up, which is a noon o'clock position or midnight o'clock, depending on which, you know what I mean, and fill it, overfill it, to be, honest. Overfill it, put the plug in it, rotate it a few times to make sure that oil gets down into the bearings, then take the plug back out, then move it to the, 1 o'clock less than sideways, so 8 o'clock or 4 o'clock, depending on if you're looking at it or the clock's looking at you from the clock's point of view. And then once the drizzle just kind of stops, then rotate it back up, put the plug in, clean it up, and then we should be good to go. For fluid, we're going to use this Polaris demand drive fluid. It used to be called something else. I don't know what it used to be called, but now it's called demand drive fluid. Now, Polaris has many different types of fluids. Just to make sure you're confused, they name them not at all what you'd think they'd be named, except for the engine oil. The engine oil makes sense. Transmissions don't take transmission fluid. They take something called AGL, which is what I call an annoyingly expensive gear case lubricant. I don't know what the A stands for them, but it's a gear case. It's the transmission fluid, and it's purple. Then you have angle drive fluid. The angle drive fluid for Polaris means anywhere you have a ring and pinion gear that is in a separate gear case that is not switchable on and off for four-wheel drive. Good example, Billy Badass, the 700, has engine, then it has a transmission, and then it has a separate rear gear case that is driven by a small drive shaft. That is a straight angle drive gear case, so that gets angle drive fluid. Then you have demand drive fluid. Demand drive fluid is the fluid that goes into any gear case that has the actual demand four-wheel drive system. So Billy Badass, the 570s, any Polaris that has the four-wheel drive system operated by the front differential, this goes in the front diff. Now, Ruby does not have that. Ruby, of course, has the four-wheel drive system operated at the hub. So the hubs get the demand drive fluid, and the front diff on this gets the angle drive fluid, which is pretty much just gear oil. But anyway, I think that's enough lesson on all of the different fluids and why they make no sense. We'll just fill it up. All right, so I like to use this big syringe, and I just fill it all the way up with the juice. I know it's not going to use it all, but we can put it back what we don't use. So we're just going to insert into the hole, and we're going to push kind of slow. We don't want to shove it in too quick. It will come back out at us. Oh, see, shoved it too quick and it came back out. It's also made difficult by that's kind of a small hole, and it needs to have some air to breathe to let it not, so you can fill it. I think we've got it nice and overfilled, which is perfect. Now, since I'm pretty sure we have it overfilled, I'm just going to put the drain plug back in, but we're not going to tighten it. We just want to put it in enough that we don't lose all this fluid. That's fine. Like I said, I like to rotate it a few times, get that oil worked down into the bearings. Okay, let's just take it back out. And now we're going to put it at, so that would be, if you're looking at it from my view, that's about 9 o'clock. So we're going to go a little past that. And there we go. Let it drain. Perfect. Spin this back up. Let's put our drain plug back in. And now we're just going to clean this off with our shop grade Windex, aka brake cleaner. All right, that is looking snazzy. I do want to inspect the other side. I don't think it was leaking, but let's make sure. Well, that looks nice and dry. Yeah, that's just cleaner in that spot, that's all. And the back side. Well, we have signs of leakage back here, but not much. And honestly, it's just on the tire. It's not actually on the rim. I think that's just from me washing it. I think that's water runoff. But if we look in here, I don't see any signs of leakage anywhere. So I think we're good with just this one side for now. Okay, oopsie daisy. Well, thank you all for hanging out with me today. I really, really appreciate it. You know, we just got lucky. As a matter of fact, I think that's what I'm going to name the video. Something about being lucky for a change instead of finding more work. Yeah, that's always a nice thing. Anyway, we just had to replace the O-ring on the outside of the hubcap instead of all the seals, but we do have that full seal kit in case we need it in the future. And, you know, if we ever get to that point, we'll go ahead and do a video on it. But for now, we just had to take care of that one hub. Hope you learned something. If you didn't, that's fine too. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me today, because I enjoyed hanging out with you all for sure. Listen, I really want to thank anybody or all of you that ran this compilation video up on your phone or your iPad or your, you know, maybe your television in the workshop. Really appreciate it. Everybody that watches, it really means a lot to me. Those of you that make comments, there's a couple of you out there that are really seem to be really strong supporters of the channel, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, next week we'll be back to some regularly scheduled programming. But in the meantime, y'all ride safe, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye now.